CJ Stroud, or Bryce Young. We all have our thoughts about who we think the better pro prospect currently is. I have mine, you have yours. Well, how about we invite a scout on the podcast to let us know who currently is the better pro prospect?
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Buckeyes for the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Monday, May 23rd in the year 2022, and I want to thank you for making Locked On Buckeyes your first listen or first watch of every single day. On today's show, we have Ryan Roberts joining us once again. He is a scout for Rise and Draft Scouting. He is here to talk about CJ Stroud, things that make him great. Bryce Young, things that make him great as well, and answer the question, who currently is the better pro prospect between these two quarterbacks? But before we get there, there are two things I need to quickly say. Number one, happy birthday to my brother, Mr. Jeremy Allen Stevens. Some call him Jeremy, some call him Stevens. His coaches used to do that all the time. I call him Germ. He is 31 today. Happy birthday, Jeremy. He got married last August. He had surgery on his knee in December. His birthday is today. He has a baby coming up that his first baby, son, is going to be coming up and being born in July. A lot happening in my brother's life in a year's time. And in the midst of that, it is his birthday. Happy birthday, Jeremy. To everyone watching us on YouTube and listening, thank you so much. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel, the Locked On Buckeyes YouTube channel, hop in on the fun. Those of you that have subscribed, thank you. We have eclipsed the 1,000 subscription mark. We keep on moving up and up and up because of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Oh, one more thing. For those of you that are watching us on YouTube, I want to apologize right now. There's a little issue with the audio. One person sounds louder than the other. I believe Ryan sounds louder than I do. I don't know what the issue is. I apologize right now. I wanted to say that before we go any further with this show. And joining us now here on Locked On Buckeyes, we are starting the week off talking about Ohio State's QB1 and comparing him against the guy that won the Heisman Trophy last year. And here to help us with that, it's Ryan Roberts from Rise and Draft Scouting. He has that weird banner and flag behind him. Irish Breakdown is the place that he works for. But Ryan, you're also doing some scouting stuff as well. Welcome back, man. I'm glad you're here.
Oh, absolutely, Jay. I appreciate you as always, man. This is always a good time.
Yeah, it's always fun when we get together. Ryan, last week, they announced that College Game Day will be in Columbus for the season opener. There's a smile on your face. There was a smile on mine. What are your early thoughts about this game between the Buckeyes and the Irish?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a competitive football game. I think that the one thing that you feel good about if you're an Irish supporter is the fact that Jim Knowles is a great defensive coordinator. I feel good about him long-term at Ohio State. But the first game in, you would think that, there obviously be some wrinkles that need to get ironed out, some things that need to get kind of, remedied, and just a nuance to understanding the scheme. So I think Notre Dame's going to go into the game against a new defense, a new defensive coordinator. So they'll have some opportunities, I think, there. And, honestly, it's going to be tough sledding against those wide receivers in the skill position that Ohio State has for Notre Dame. Notre Dame is going to have a good defense, I think, but the ability to match up against all those playmakers, it's going to be a tough one. So I actually think that's going to be kind of a high-scoring affair, to be honest, because I know Ohio State's going to get theirs. I think Notre Dame's going to have some advantages from their offense comparative to, the first game that Jim Knowles is going to coach. So I think it's going to be a competitive football game. I think it's going to be a little bit high-scoring. I think it definitely goes in Ohio State's favor. Not only is it College Game Day that first weekend, but also I think them putting it as a 7:30 game is a big, big help to Ohio State. That's really – the night games is where you really get that home field advantage kind of feel. So I think it's going to be a competitive football game, though. I don't think it's going to be one-sided either way. I think it's going to be a little high scoring, but I'm hoping that the first true game in the Marcus Freeman era, I know he coached the bowl game last year. I hope that they come into the shoe and they play with a lot of energy, because that is lacked in Notre Dame's recent big games that they've played, whether it be Clemson, the Alabamas, the Georgias in recent years. They seem to come out flat without limited energy. So I'm hoping that they just come into the shoe and are ready to play with the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Man, this is a great way to even start off the season for anybody. I mean, the first primetime game, at least that first full weekend of games. I don't know if that whatever August 27th, the weekend before. I don't know if ABC or ESPN is going to have a primetime game that day. But for it to be the first full weekend of college football, and on that Saturday, you get two teams that don't really play each other. They played 95 and 96. They played, I think, twice, like 30, 40 years prior to that. They played, I think, twice in the 2000s, 2010s recently. But they don't play that much at all. And you get these schools that really aren't that far away geographically.
No.
And for Notre Dame to come to the shoe with Marcus Freeman, this being his first time being a head coach in a full season, James Laurinaitis, former Buckeye linebacker, former teammate of Marcus Freeman's, is now in South Bend as well. I mean, there's so many different storylines, but on the field itself, if the Irish come out strong, if they come out flat, it can still be a high-scoring affair. My biggest thing, though, I'm curious about the defense of Ohio State and how they rise to the occasion. I heard one person say the linebackers at Ohio State might be the biggest liability on defense. And if that's the case, I mean, I don't know much about Notre Dame just yet. I know they have a track record of having a really good offensive line. Bad linebacker play could really be something that goes into Notre Dame's favor because of how good their O-line normally is. So I'm looking forward to it, man. But like I said, man, it's just a great way to start the season. And it doesn't get much better than having two of these teams that just when you look at their helmet, you know what they mean to college football.
Yeah, no, I mean, you said it perfectly, Jay. And honestly, I mean, I am the most, we call it BK PTSD, right? Like you kind of think you're getting close, and then it's just like you're kind of let down tremendously. That's what it's kind of been as a Notre Dame fan in recent years. I mean, I was born in 91, so I wasn't alive for the last time Notre Dame won a championship, so it's always just kind of been hoping they get back to prominence, and they haven't gotten there, obviously. I think that what Marcus Freeman has kind of provided to them is there's been a big influx as far as the energy aspect of it, because like I cover recruiting. So, I mean, right now Notre Dame has the number one recruiting class in 2023. They're off to a great start, but in order for them to get to the level that they want to get, they have to be the number one power in the Midwest. And right now, Ohio State is that, right? Like they have been that consistent fixture on the recruiting side of things, on the winning championships, being that Midwest power. So for Notre Dame to get to where they want to be, they have to eventually get to the level of Ohio State and surpass them, which obviously as a Notre Dame fan, I hope that does happen. But I think this will be, if nothing else, a good indicator as far as what is the separation of these two teams, currently. How much does Notre Dame have to grow? How much do they have to do in order to continue to compete at that level and then eventually make that jump for championships? And I think that first game is a perfect starting point for the Marcus Freeman era for them. And I also think that Ohio State, you're going to see a lot of them early on as far as, the offense is going to be spectacular. You would assume the offensive line would be very improved. The questions obviously are going to be how much can that defense get better? Because if it can get a lot better, then they can compete for a championship too, because you have a quarterback like CJ Stroud, you have the wide receivers, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and all those, Travion Henderson at running back. You have dudes everywhere. The defense is the question mark going into the season.
We're here with Ryan Roberts from Rise and Draft Scouting. He's also a part of the team at Irish Breakdown covering the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. We're getting away from the season opener talk to really talk about something that it's going to be maybe one of the biggest debates this summer during the season and even beginning of next year leading up to the NFL draft, CJ Stroud or Bryce Young. Before we get to the comparison part, what do you like from one season of play from CJ Stroud?
Yeah, I think that the improvement was the biggest thing for me, right? Like the first couple games of the season struggled a little bit, and you were kind of hoping that it's obviously a redshirt freshman, right? Like the previous year, he didn't throw a single pass part of Ohio State during that true freshman season. So it was all new to him, right? And the game just seemed to be going a little fast early on, but by the end of the season, he just seemed completely comfortable inside his own skin. And you really just saw an evolution to him as a passer, and the anticipation is fantastic. The accuracy is fantastic. He's got subtle movements in the pocket, which were improved throughout the season. I think that is a guy that is going to need to use his athleticism a little bit more than he typically does, honestly, because I think that he's a better athlete than maybe his play style would predict. But like right now, comfortable in the pocket, very accurate, has good anticipation all levels of the field, and he has some of the prettier deep ball accuracy that I've seen over the last couple of years. So there's very good tools to start out with a guy like a CJ Stroud.
You made a comment about him using more of his athleticism this upcoming season. I'm thinking back to a statement he made last year when saying he's a quarterback. And I'm not going to say it word for word, but he basically said, my job is to use my arm, not my legs. Now, this is in a time when he was, I think, responding to things he saw on social media, maybe watched some TV, YouTube, maybe podcasts like this one, where people were being critical of him not utilizing his legs. We've also seen Ryan Day go away from a trend that was in college football, where there were a lot of mobile quarterbacks that used their arms and their leg to be successful and to move the ball on the field. Using his athleticism, I think, is wise. I don't know how much of that we'll see, because even with Justin Fields really didn't use the speed or the athleticism that he had, I think, as much as he probably should have in times he should have, because I think he wanted to play hero ball sometimes, win the Heisman, and make some of those throws to win that. Just my own thoughts about that 2020 season.
Yep.
I'm curious about how much of that athleticism we'll see from CJ Stroud, because, I mean, it's a quarterback award basically for the Heisman, and we all know throwing it with your arm now is going to win it for you, not so much the legs. So I'm curious if he's going to be a Heisman kind of guy, be a team-first kind of guy. What do we need to do to win? I'm curious what type of play we'll get from him, because his mindset is going to dictate, I do believe, how he plays on the field.
Yeah, no, it's really well said. I think for me, like, this is not a Urban Meyer offense anymore, right? So, like, I don't want them running a bunch of zone read and quarterback run game. Like, that's just not CJ who he is. CJ is a pass-first quarterback, but I think the one thing that I think would set him over the top is you saw the evolution as a passer, but I really think that there were some points where, you know, he has a subtle slot up into the pocket and there's just green grass in front of him where, like, hey, man, let's just take off here. Let's get an easy first down. And let's not get stuck in the pocket at times, right? Because I know when you have guys like Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and Jackson Smith and Jigba and Marvin Harrison Jr. and all the guys that you have, it's very easy to say, like, I'm going to be a passer first, which he is. He's not a scrambling quarterback. He's not. I think he had negative rushing yards last year. Like, that's just not what he is, right? He's a pure pocket quarterback. But what I do think is kind of hit him with his game is I just think he's a good athlete. Like, I've seen him move around in the pocket a little bit, step to the side, get out of pressure a little bit. I think he's a plus athlete for the quarterback position. So I think that there's just going to be that simple thing of, like, hey, Aaron Rodgers is not a dynamic athlete either, right? Like, he's never going to run zone read, but you saw Aaron Rodgers is very willing to, I'm going to pick up a first down with my legs. And I think that that's going to be the difference between being a great quarterback and maybe being an elite level quarterback for a guy like a CJ Stroud. He's already a great college quarterback. He can be a great college quarterback without ever utilizing the feet. But I think that if he should be a guy that I can pick up 2 to 3 first downs a game, just, you know, kind of as a scrambler, as a guy that can, you know, seize green grass in front of me and take it. So I think that's an evolution they should take, because I think it would just make things a little bit easier for him, to be honest.
In the same way we just talked about CJ Stroud, what did you see from Bryce Young last year when he was the starting quarterback for Alabama?
I think the biggest plus with the Bryce Young, and it's pretty rare, is he is just so good in the pocket, man. Like, he has just this feel in the pocket where sudden subtle slides. I mentioned it with CJ Stroud, but I think it's even better with a guy like a Bryce Young, man. Like, he just feels everything around him so well, and he's got kind of that playmaker feel to him where, like, he knows when step up in the pocket, he knows when to slide out of pressure, he knows when to scramble out of pressure and extend plays. There's just an innate feel to playing quarterback, and I mean, he has good anticipation himself, and he's one of the more accurate throwers I honestly I've seen, man. Like, I just feel like the ball placement is always consistent. I don't think his downfield accuracy is as good as the CJ Stroud, just in direct comparison, but I think when you're talking short to intermediate, I mean, the kid is absolutely pinpoint. I also think he's another player that you should probably use your athleticism a little more sometimes, you know? Like, he has some plays where you just, like, you break pocket, and he's incredibly quick. I don't think he's the fastest straight line runner of all time, but he's definitely a guy that, similar to Stroud, can pick up 2 to 3 first downs a game with his athleticism. There's no doubt. So I think the biggest selling point, though, for Young is he's just so advanced from a mental capacity, from a feel perspective. There's just some things in his game right now that like it's just very hard to teach. So it's just a very natural, instinctual player as far as playing the quarterback position.
Ryan, there'll be a lot of fans here, listeners here, that'll be wanting to know the 40 times of these two guys. I know you're a track guy, maybe a track coach, excuse me. Would you think like they're both like 4.65, 4.7 guys, 40 speeds?
I would say Stroud is probably like a 4.7 low to mid 4.7 guy, like 4.71 to 4.75, somewhere in that ballpark. I think Young's probably around 4.75 to 4.7 high, so he's probably more like a 4.78 type of dude. I think for me, Young is a lot more quick twitch than he is straight line fast, but I think CJ can actually move a little bit. Like I think that his straight line stuff is going to be a lot better than people think. So I think they're both somewhere in the 4.7s about, I would say. Good athletes, not great athletes.
That's still not bad. That's not bad for a quarterback. And with both schools wanting to do different things with their quarterbacks than a lot of, like I said, previous 10 years. I mean, you had the Johnny Manziel who ran things, and a lot of coaches were doing the mobile quarterback. I mean, that was a trend, not just at college. I mean, you had it a little bit in the NFL. You had it in high schools. I mean, that was the trend. I do like the way we're making a circle back to the quarterback position being what I believe it was always meant to be. When you're looking at these two young men, they're quarterbacks, who do you think has the better arm strength?
I would say Stroud slightly. I think that both of them are pretty similar, though, to be honest. I think that one thing that I like about both guys is they're very natural throwers. The ball comes out of their hand very easily. Like it's not, they both have quick releases, good over top releases. They're not, 3/4 throwers or sidearm throwers. So, but I would give the slight edge to Stroud just because I think it's the longer leverage. He's 6'3" comparative to Bryce Young being 5'11" or 6 foot, somewhere in that ballpark. So I think he has a little more. I think that velocity wise, they're pretty similar as far as like fitting things in the window, short to intermediate. But I think that one thing that CJ definitely has over Bryce is I think that his arm is stronger when you're talking about being able to push the ball vertically. Like his deep ball is just a little more natural, in my opinion.
What about, well, you said pocket presence. You already hit me because that was the next one I was going to bring up. Pocket presence and awareness, but it seems like that's already Bryce Young's little category that he's won.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, the thing about CJ is I thought that CJ really improved in that department as far as the pocket awareness during the year. I thought he was just so much more just comfortable moving down the stretch. The one thing I will say, though, about CJ is when he does have some quick pressure, I think he does get a little bit of happy feet at times, and I think that he gets a little impatient in the pocket. So I think that's something that needs to improve a little bit. Bryce Young is just so calm, man. Like his lower and upper body just always seemed to be in alignment and just seems to be kind of comfortable, a little more comfortable in the pocket. So I think CJ is going to be plus in that department. But again, I think Bryce Young is just one of the better players I've evaluated so far as his comfortability in the pocket.
Who is more comfortable in the pocket, him, Mac Jones, or Tua?
I would say Bryce. Bryce probably number one, Mac, and then Tua. Tua had a little freelancer style to him, which is fine. But I felt like he got happy feet sometimes. Mac was very calm back there for the most part. And I just, man, like Bryce Young just seems like one of those guys. They usually think of like the taller quarterbacks or like the guys that are going to, stare down the barrel, right, and not get antsy against pressure. I mean, he's 5'11", man, and he just does not get he doesn't get scathed by pressure at all. So I think he's just very rare in that instance.
When you think about C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young, I should have written some more of these things down. They were in my head a couple days ago. You got arm strength for Stroud. You got pocket presence and awareness for Bryce Young. What's another category when you think about comparing these two young men?
I think accuracy and processing is probably a good conversation to talk about, right? I think that processing is very close. I think that the anticipation I would give slightly to Stroud. I mean, from a, just the ability to work through reads, like during the end of the season, man, I thought like he knew where he was going to go, pre-snap for the most part, but then he was just very good at reading a defense. I think though that honestly, Bryce Young is good in that department as well. But I would give the slight edge to CJ Stroud as far as being a processor and having anticipation. Accuracy-wise, another pretty close one because CJ is also very accurate. But I thought, man, I think Bryce is maybe a little more accurate. He's more accurate, short to intermediate. Like I think the ball placement is just pinpoint, while I think CJ Stroud is is a little more accurate working deep because I think he's just got a more natural deep ball to him. So, man, again, you're really picking hairs because for like the feel perspective of both these quarterbacks, the accuracy perspective of both these quarterbacks is really close, honestly. I think you're really kind of just pulling off, picking hairs a little bit for some of these attributes. Because I mean, even accuracy, it's just like for two levels of the field, I think I would give it to Bryce, but then in the the pushing it downfield, then I would give it to CJ. Like it's just really close in that conversation.
When you think about these two guys, I don't know if you do this per se because I'm not in your field, but as someone watching football, the physical makeup, how you look physically. Now, I know they do a lot of testing at the combine, testing at the pro days. The NFL, they want to know everything about your medicals before really making a major investment with you. Not if it's second round, third round, or you're the first overall pick. They want to know a lot about you. So when you think about physical makeup, physically height, weight, leanness of the body, who do you say has that, wins that category there? And I shouldn't do this, but I do double question sometimes. Is that a big deciding factor about who the number one overall pick is or who is the first quarterback taken in the draft?
Look, size is becoming less of a factor, but it still matters, Jay. It does. It 100% does. So you're talking CJ Stroud is 6'3", right around 220 pounds, has long limbs. Like he looks more like your traditional quarterback that you want out there, right? And Bryce Young, the biggest talking point about him is going to be his size. I mean, he's listed at 6 foot, which tells me he's probably right around 5'11". He's 194 pounds. I mean, even the guys that you've seen, the Kyler Murrays of the world, the Russell Wilsons of the world, who have been sub 6 foot quarterbacks, they were a lot more physically put together, right? Like they were a little bulkier of players. Bryce Young's a little thin right now. I mean, we'll see if he is able to put on some weight during this offseason, but right now he's a little bit of a thin quarterback. So if you're just doing the eye test thing, CJ Stroud is definitely a more impressive player than Bryce Young. Like there's no doubt about it. It's becoming less of an issue, but I will say it makes people more willing to bet on a smaller quarterback. The fact that we've had Russell Wilson, we've had Kyler Murray, we've had even Drew Brees, even though it's a different style of quarterback of like 6 foot or shorter quarterbacks, it's starting to be a little bit of a trend. But the fact of the matter is that I just named 3 players historically that are that small, and they're still an outlier, right? So there is a little bit of an outlier feel to Bryce Young. Like this isn't the traditional quarterback. It's not. It's becoming more of a tradition, but it's still not traditional. Like it's not there yet. So there are going to be some traditionalist scouts who look at CJ Stroud and say, that's my guy over Bryce Young. And they don't even really watch the film as much because they're just like, that's what an NFL quarterback looks like, right? So it can be a deciding factor. And I would say for me, if I have both those guys graded very similarly, then I'm going to defer to the bigger guy. Like I just am. That's just my opinion. Like, and that goes at any position. It's like if I have an offensive tackle, for instance, that is one 6'5", 300, and one is 6'7", 320, and I have similar grades on them, very close, I'm going to defer to the 6'7", 320. Like it's a big man's game. I'm just always going to defer to the taller size. So if there's not separation, I think it comes into play, but it's not a huge point of emphasis in my evaluation until it's like a really close conversation to have.
Interesting. You mentioned Kyler Murray. I mean, Russell Wilson, Drew Brees, they don't look like little kids, like toddlers playing playing football with 10-year-olds. Kyler Murray looks like he is a toddler playing with 10, 12-year-old kids on the basketball court or on the football field, just backyard football. I mean, I love Kyler Murray. I think he's a really good quarterback, but that's what I think about when I see him running around on the field. It's like, hey, I'm just a little toddler. I shouldn't be out here, but I'm making these older guys look bad.
Yeah. Look, when you're talking, because I mean, I think if I remember correctly, so Russell Wilson was right around 5'11". He was like 205 pounds. Like he was a pretty dense dude.
Yeah.
Kyler Murray was 5'10" and some change, and he was like 210 pounds, I think, at the combine or something. So he was a dense dude. Something like that, man. Like he was a little bigger. Like I remember, so he was one of those guys that added a lot of weight to trying to hit that threshold. You know what I'm saying?
Smart.
But like in Oklahoma, he was much smaller. Like he was like 190, 195 pounds. So that's why when the Bryce Young conversation happens, like that's going to be a thing that people are going to nitpick a lot. It's not so much that he's going to be 5'11" or 6 foot. It's the fact that he's only 194 pounds and he doesn't even look like he's 194 pounds. I mean, like, he looks sleek. Like, I would say high 180s is what he kind of looks like to me. So that's going to be the biggest question mark as far as the size. I don't worry as much about the height anymore, just because if you can find passing windows, you can find passing windows. I don't care if you're 5'11", or I don't care if you're 6'3". There are some guys that are 6'5" that they get so many passes batted down because they just don't understand how to manipulate passing lanes. Like, it's just a thing, right? So that's not a concern for me or for Bryce Young at all. The long-term concern is durability-wise. If you're a 190-pound quarterback, are you going to be able to withstand the hits on the NFL level to have a long and successful career? Like, that is a talking point. Like, that was even with Devonta Smith, last year in the draft. It wasn't, he hadn't gotten hurt, which, like, it's a non-issue, but 160-something pounds on the NFL level is a very small wide receiver. Like, is he going to be able to withstand hits on the next level? He did as a rookie. Bryce Young's going to have to answer if he can or not. But right now, that is the biggest concern, is the durability and the size profile that he brings to the game.
Ryan, you mentioned a long-term concern for Bryce Young. What's a long-term concern for CJ Stroud?
That's a good question. I think that for me, I don't really have a long-term one, I guess. I mean, for me, it's more about being the guy at the end of the year and then continuing to grow. Because, I mean, my biggest thing for him is, I think that there is some flashes of really good stuff in the pocket, but then there are times where I think that he does get happy feet. I really do. And that's going to throw off his base a little bit. That's going to throw off consistency and accuracy. So I think it's just continuing to evolve as far as being comfortable in the pocket. If he continues to do that, then I don't really have a long-term concern, because, I mean, I think he's got everything from arm strength is NFL caliber. There's no doubt. He's very accurate. He's a good processor. If he's able to continue to grow inside the pocket, I guess that would be my only concern, is, like, is he going to be fully comfortable all the time in the pocket? Because there are some times where I don't think he's completely comfortable, but even that I thought he started to get a lot better with during the season.
That could have been some stuff with the offensive line last year. Maybe he wasn't comfortable because of the way some of the blocking schemes and some of the guys were blocking. I do remember sometimes I was watching and I'm like, the happy feet you're talking about, I remember those. And I wonder if it was he 100% comfortable with the offensive line blocking on that play based off what Stroud was seeing pre-snap from the defense. That's just my first thought about that, was maybe he was a little uncomfortable because of the guys that were in front of him.
No, it is very likely that had a large portion to do with it, because I know we've talked about Nicholas Petit-Frere. I didn't think his film was very good last year. I thought there were a lot of pressures he gave up. Dwayne Jones, I think, has massive upside at right tackle, but, man, I think that he just needs to lose a little bit of weight right now, man. Like, he's just not incredibly flexible. He's got a little bit of heavy feet because he's 360-plus pounds, and I just don't think that he needs to be 360-plus pounds. And then Thayer Munford didn't have a great season, and I know Luke Whippler ended up doing a nice job in its center, but even he wasn't the starting center to begin the year where Harry Miller was. So, yeah, I think that it wasn't a great unit up front with the offensive line. That's why I'm excited for Ohio State, because I do want Ohio State to always be a competitive team, because I think it makes college football just better all the time, right? So I really do like I mean, Jim Knowles was a great hire as defense coordinator, but I think Justin Fry as the offensive line coach, I think, is going to pay huge dividends long-term, because you've had guys. I mean, Nicholas Petit-Frere was a very talented player coming out of Florida as a high school recruit. Paris Johnson's a very high recruit in that regard as well. There's talent up front. It's just about the development that hasn't been great on the offensive line. So I'm excited about Justin Fry getting there and improving that offensive line pretty quickly, hopefully.
Ron, we went through a long checklist of comparing and contrasting these two gentlemen, just thinking about what they bring to the table, what we saw last year, some long-term concerns, possibilities for Stroud. You mentioned one in great depth and detail with Bryce Young, but as it stands right now, this is May of 2022. The draft is not until 2023. I assume Stroud's coming out at the end of the year. I would be shocked if he does a Matt Leinart and then comes back for the very next year, his last year in college. But as it stands right now, who do you see as the better pro prospect between CJ Stroud and Bryce Young?
I think it's really going to depend on the system that teams are running, to be honest with you. I slightly grade Bryce just a hair above CJ right now, just because I think that quarterback is one of those conversations and evaluation that there's a lot of hidden attributes to a quarterback, right? And I talked a lot about just Bryce's ability to manipulate a pocket and just kind of the maturity that he has to the position. Like, I'm always going to value those things at a high level. So I think they're both slam dunk first round players. I think that Bryce Young, I would just a little tiny bit. I would just prefer him just a tiny bit. But I think that what you're going to see is teams that are more West Coast driven, short to intermediate type of feel, they're going to value up Bryce Young. But then if there's a more vertical based passing game, then I think that you're going to CJ Stroud all day, right? So I think it is really just kind of picking your flavor. But I did grade Bryce Young just slightly higher than CJ, but I think it's going to be a fantastic duel to see who the first quarterback off the board is.
It would be great. It would be absolutely great if we can get these two guys playing against each other in the playoff or the national championship. I think that quarterback duo, and then also Ryan Day versus Nick Saban again, getting these two amazing schools on the field again would be great for the game. It would be great to just compare these two guys, one on offense, one on the other. One of them's on the field, or the other one amazing quarterback's on the field the entire time. Ryan, it's fun having you on. Guys, I've already talked to Ryan about having some future shows with him right here on Locked on Buckeyes, possibly one in June, another one about Stroud, but we won't be featuring Bryce Young, and then another one down the road whenever he releases his 2023 mock draft, trying to get him back on for that. Ryan, the show's over, man, but before we get out of here, where can people follow you on Twitter and then check out some of the amazing things you're doing at Irish Breakdown and Rise and Draft Scouting?
Yeah, I would say this real quick, Jay, to your last point. If Bryce Young and CJ Stroud are face off in the playoff, I hope Notre Dame's in the other game and we face off against whoever the winner is, right? So, but I appreciate you as always, man. You can follow me at Rise and Draft on Twitter. You can also go to riseanddraft.com for all the NFL draft stuff. If you're a draft nerd, we already have 2023 prospects up in there on the mock draft database and in the prospect database and doing all that type of stuff. So that's where the main NFL draft source is. And then you could also go to, Ohio State fans, if you want to do some early scouting on some Notre Dame players, you can go to irishbreakdown.com on Sports Illustrated, and you can check out, we have stuff from team analysis, projected depth charts, recruiting side is what I dabble in mostly. But if you want to do some early scouting on the irishbreakdown.com.
And guys, you can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. It's always fun having Ryan on the show. And I believe this is a great way to start this week leading up to a holiday weekend, Memorial Day weekend. Have fun, look ready for it, get ready for it. I hope the weather's beautiful, no matter where Ryan is or where I am or where you are. I hope we all have beautiful weather all week, the weekend. Just get ready for a fun time in the sun. We're out here on this Monday, but guys, get ready for the week, enjoy it, and go Bucks.